All right. Good morning. Welcome to the PTNI's Daily Show. Happy Thursday morning. Hope your morning is off to a great start. My name is Alan. I'm happy to be your host today. Currently have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Operating Officer here at the Institute of Clinical Excellence and a faculty member in the Fitness Athlete Division. We're live here on Leadership Thursday. We talk all things practice management and ownership, small business development. It is Leadership Thursday, which means it's also Gut Check Thursday. We took a little break last week for Thanksgiving. But we're back this week straight from CrossFit.com workout, actually last Thanksgiving. Very simple workout. Go for a run for 35 minutes, every 5 minutes, but not at the start of the workout. Stop and do 15 burpees. So longer, more moderate intensity aerobic piece. Maybe not the best if you are in somewhere like Michigan where it's about 20 degrees and windy and snowing right now. Feel free to sub that run out for something like a bike or a run, but just getting in some longer aerobic capacity work this week. We have some scaling options on the Instagram and Facebook posts. So if you're thinking, hey, I want to try this in the clinic with a patient or a client, but it's too long, 35 minutes is quite a long time to be doing in the clinic. It's too much volume for my patient or client, then check out our scaling options there. So let's get into today's topic. I want to apologize, first of all, for my voice. It's probably going to slowly fade across the next 15 minutes. I've got a touch of the man flu here, so my voice is slowly fading as the day goes on. I've already coached a couple hours this morning as well, so it's going to be quite raspy, so I apologize. So this week, we're going to build upon an episode that we did 2 weeks ago. We talked about literally when to know and how to know who to hire and when to hire them if you're thinking about adding somebody else to your clinic, beginning to grow your clinic. So go back and listen to that episode first if you haven't, because we're going to assume that you've listened to that episode as a baseline beginning today's episode. Today, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts a lot more of literally talking about how to pay somebody. When we talk about how can we get paid, specifically talking about in the United States of America, there are basically two different routes. We're going to talk about what W-2 pay consists of. It's a pay method that we're probably most familiar with as physical therapists, and also another method, 1099 independent contractor pay, that we're much less comfortable with as physical therapists. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of both and what we think is best based on where you're at in your clinic practice and in the growth and development of your clinic. So those are going to be the three things we talk about today. So first things first, what is W-2 pay? We're very familiar with this. Most of us probably have been paid this way, maybe our entire career, maybe at every job we've ever held. So W-2 pay is basically either salaried or hourly pay. So doesn't matter if you have a salary, doesn't matter if you work hourly. This is basically pay for our traditional 40-hour kind of 9 to 5 work week that we're used to. This is pay that is taxed already by our employer if we are the employee. In this model, you are considered an employee of the organization, the company that you work for. Considered either a salaried or hourly employee. You're considered a W-2 employee. And it's important to know that because it comes with some pros and cons, some benefits. And the first thing to know is, obviously, if you're paid hourly, you're getting paid for the hours that you work and not for the hours that you don't work. Pretty straightforward. With hourly work, we're mostly comfortable with the idea that if we work over 40 hours, if we work over full time, that we are entitled to overtime. This is a protection by both state and federal law for sure, state law in most states. This is maybe not something that people stand up for themselves on, but you are entitled to overtime pay beyond 40 hours. So on the employer side, that's something you need to be aware of, that based on the state in which your clinic is located, you may be required to pay overtime pay. So keep that in mind, that if we think about physical therapy practice in the idea of W-2 pay, that person's work week should consist of 40 hours total of work and no more. That includes patient care. That includes documentation. That includes any other job responsibilities you may assign to that person should be completed in that 40 hours. And that if that person has to work beyond 40 hours, you may be required legally to pay that person overtime. And that may be just extra time getting paid for those hours. That may be time and a half. That may be double time getting paid twice the hourly rate. So you need to be familiar with your state labor laws on having employees who are W-2 hourly employees. Now, we can also have a salary and be a W-2 employee. We can have a fixed amount of income that does not change based on the hours we work. And now traditionally we think of salary is it doesn't matter how much you work, you get the same amount of pay, and there are no rules that you can work 10 hours a week and get your salary. That's certainly true. That sounds pretty sweet. It usually doesn't go that way. We think that we're not entitled to overtime if we're salary, which is not true. Salary W-2 pay is very similar to hourly W-2 pay, and that full-time is usually considered at 40 hours. And that if you work beyond that, you are supposed to get paid overtime. So something to consider both is the employer and the employee with W-2 pay is the idea that our work week should consist of whatever full-time is considered in your state. Typically, that's going to be 40 hours. In physical therapy, both hourly and salary W-2 employees very rarely work 40 hours or less. We're all very unfortunately familiar with the idea that we are going to see 40 hours or maybe more of patient care and then have to do our documentation at home, do our patient follow-ups at home on the weekends, whatever, and that should be paid as overtime pay. So as you start to create your own business, start to think about hiring employees underneath of you. If you're thinking of going the W-2 route, that is a big consideration you need to keep in mind. Am I setting a realistic expectation of a traditional 40-hour work week, or am I just hoping that folks will work beyond 40 hours to get all their job tasks done and will not ask me for overtime pay, will not sue me for overtime pay? So those are all considerations you need to keep in mind when you are running your own practice and having W-2 employees underneath you. So that's the pay itself. Other things that go along with W-2 pay, you need to usually provide health insurance, or you need to pay a tax penalty if you cannot provide health insurance. If you're too small of a company, if you don't qualify for an exemption, those sorts of things. These are things that an accountant can help you figure out. Do I have to provide it? If so, what level of care do I need to provide? If I can't provide it, if I don't qualify for an exemption, if I'm too small of a company, do I need to pay a tax penalty for that? So those are all questions you need to be asking when you're thinking about bringing somebody on as a W-2 hourly or salary employee. Other things to keep in mind is as the employer with W-2 employees, you are unfortunately responsible for being this weird tax middleman between both state and federal governments and your employees. You are required to withhold a number of different taxes from these employees, payroll taxes, things like federal income tax, state income tax, Medicare tax, Social Security tax, and you are not keeping this money. You are responsible to pay it to the government on behalf of the employee, and that is done on a quarterly basis. So you become this weird tax middleman where you either need to pay for accounting software that calculates how much tax to withhold from their paychecks, or you have to pay an accountant to do this math for you and do your payroll for you. Either way, it incurs a time and money cost to withhold these taxes from that employee. And that is a requirement of W-2 work. So that is something to keep in mind with W-2 work as well, is do I have the time to sit down and crunch all this math? Do I have the knowledge to begin with to do this? Or do I have the money to pay somebody else to do it for me? One way or the other, it has to get done. So that is something to keep in mind as well when we're thinking about bringing somebody on board, and bringing them on board as a W-2 employee. Now, what are the quote unquote benefits of W-2 employment specifically to the employer? Because they're an employee, you can dictate a lot of things to them and about what they do. You can establish a dress code. You can tell them how to practice, right? Literally down to, hey, every patient that comes in with back pain, you need to give them prone press ups, right? Obviously, hopefully you wouldn't do that. It's not very sound clinical reasoning, but you can dictate how they perform their work as well as the scope of their work. And you can make them do basically whatever within the scope of that work while they're on the job, right? If a patient cancels, you could have that person clean the toilet. You could make that person read a research article. You could make that person make photocopies, right? We all have had positions where we've probably done a lot of busy work when we're not directly treating patients, and that comes under the scope of W-2 work. So you have a lot more control over the employee because they are considered an employee of the organization, of what they can do at work, what you can have them do, how they act, how they dress, how their professional behavior is. So something to keep in mind with W-2 work. Now, the opposite of a lot of what we just talked about is the 1099 independent contractor model. We are much less familiar with both paying this way and being paid this way in the profession of physical therapy, and really in healthcare in general. Most healthcare providers are W-2 salaried employees, and they are very unfamiliar with 1099 work. But we do need to talk about it. It's a very different way of paying people. It's a very different way of doing business that has its pros and cons, but may be appropriate for you and your business. So 1099 independent contractor, what does that consist of? This is, you might think of, your toilet breaks and you call somebody and somebody shows up and they fix your toilet. That person is likely a contractor. They are offering plumbing contract services to a plumbing organization, and they are accepting work as it's offered. That is essentially the basis of contract work. I have work for you to do. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? And you are not an employee in a 1099 model. You are free to say no to that work. Hey, Mrs. Johnson over on Elm Street has a broken toilet. Steve, can you go fix it right now? No, I don't want to do that right now. That is your right as an independent contractor to refuse work at any time. You may be familiar with this model. This is often the model used in hair salons, barbershops. Folks often rent a room or rent a chair and pay some portion of their money back to the business, and then are free to work their own hours, come and go as they please, establish their own client basis, and kind of do their job as they see fit. Right? Nobody there is telling Steve how to fix Mrs. Johnson's toilet. Nobody's telling the person at the barbershop how to cut somebody's hair. They are accepting work, performing the work, completing the work, obtaining payment, giving a portion of that money back to the business that has contracted with them. So that is the basis of the 1099 independent contractor model. Now, this can be used in physical therapy. Some would argue that it can't, but it can be, but you need to respect labor laws in regards to independent contractor work. The key here is independent, independent, independent contractor. When you are bringing somebody on board as an independent contractor, they are not your employee. They are free to accept work or decline work at any time. This can be a little bit difficult in the scope of patient care because you cannot technically tell them when to see patients. You can say, we have patients at our clinic that want to be seen. They're going to call or text this number or come in. Are you available to see these patients as they schedule with you? That is the basis of using independent contract work in physical therapy. Essentially, the physical therapist is going to set their own schedule. They're going to schedule their own patients. You cannot tell them when to work. You cannot tell them that their shift is 7 to 3 or 9 to 6. They make their own schedule. They run their own race. If you're an insurance-based clinic, they're still going to bill that insurance. And the end result is whether you're taking insurance or cash, some portion of that money is going to come back to you as the business owner, and some of it is going to go to the contractor for completing that contract work, which in the case of physical therapy was evaluating and treating that patient. So it can be done in the physical therapy model. Now, this looks a lot different in physical therapy because we don't have that control. We don't have that micromanagement that we typically see in most physical therapy practices. We cannot tell this person how to dress. We can certainly provide them with a uniform and they're welcome to wear it, but we can't mandate that. We can't tell them how to practice at all. If they want to come in and have people blow on balloons to fix their low back pain, they are welcome to do that. You cannot tell them how to do their job. You can offer them work, which they can accept or decline. You cannot dictate their scope of work. You cannot dictate how they do their work. You cannot tell them they have to be somewhere at a specific time. You cannot say, we're having a meeting today at 1 p.m. You have to be there. You say, hey, we're going to have a meeting today at 1. We're going to talk about some stuff related to work. This will be paid as if you had seen a patient. Are you able to come? And they can say yes or no. So again, it's kind of a reframing of how we're used to in traditional physical therapy practice, but it can still work in the scope of physical therapy practice. Pay wise, the pay is literally whatever you dictate. in that contract that you draft with that independent contractor. You can have a percentage based. I'm going to pay you 55% of all the revenue you generate. I'm going to pay you a fixed amount. Every patient you see for an hour visit, I'm going to pay you $75. Whatever you stipulate in the contract, if the contractor agrees to it, is what the pay rate is. So it's very different than establishing a set salary or a set hourly rate. But nonetheless, it can be done. It's just a matter of understanding in the back end what your revenue is, what your reimbursement or collection per patient is, what your hourly rate might be if you're cash-based physical therapist, and going from there to come up with a rate that's fair to the contractor that they're ultimately going to accept. And then establishing that contract for some length of time. I wouldn't recommend signing an indefinite contract. Most people probably aren't going to sign that. With these folks, you cannot have them sign a non-compete or an NDA. They are contractors. Again, they are free to come and go as they please. They're free to work at a clinic next door or across the street or across town. They're free to have their own side hustle in a gym or something like that. The key here, again, is that they are not your employee. They do not work exclusively for you. They are an independent contractor. Tax-wise, it also looks a lot different. You are not responsible for being that awkward tax middleman between the government and this person. You do not collect payroll tax or income tax or Social Security tax, unemployment insurance tax, anything like that. You don't have to provide any benefits. It is basically see patient, get paid. The rest of it is on the independent contractor to figure out. What's going to work best is if these independent contractors form their own LLC and treat themselves as an employee of their own company, essentially. It's going to be the most beneficial to them for taxes and protect both of you in the argument that they are an independent contractor and not your employee. So that's the basis of 1099 work. It's a lot easier financially and logistically, tax-wise, because you don't have to hold on to money. You don't have to worry about making quarterly tax payments on their behalf. You just have to worry about the taxes, your own personal taxes is the individual that runs the business, and also the business's taxes itself. So it's a lot easier from a tax perspective. So again, pros and cons. Easier logistically, a little bit easier financially. Clinics that practice in a 1099 model tend to have less back-end staff. That tends to lower overall overhead costs, tends to leave more money in the company to buy stuff like equipment, to have more money to offer on the contract rate to those contractors. So pros and cons, pluses and minuses. Some is better for some clinics and some leadership styles, and the other is better for others. It's just a matter of how you want to run your business and where you're at in your practice. So we always come to the question at the end of, okay, great. I have a better understanding of what is W-2 work, what is 1099 work. How do I know which one is best? Which one is quote unquote best? And the answer is it's really going to depend. It's mainly going to depend on the person that you are looking at bringing on board. The 1099 model, again, functions similar to a hairstylist or barbershop model or a skilled trade contractor. It's going to function best when the person you're looking at bringing on board is very independent. Somebody that when a patient doesn't come in, if they're getting paid per patient, 55% of zero is zero. So when they don't have a patient coming in, they're not getting paid. It's going to require a mindset shift from you. When they have a patient that does not show up, if they have a patient that needs to reschedule or cancels or whatever, you cannot then make that person clean the toilets. That person is free to do whatever. They can watch YouTube videos. They can check email. They can go to the grocery store. They can go work out. They can go home, whatever. You are not able to dictate what that person does with their time at work, quote unquote work, because they are legally not your employee. So a little bit of a mind shift set there. The thing there is it's going to function best in a 1099 model for somebody who will use that time to do something that's going to generate more patient visits, right? Somebody who's going to say, okay, a patient canceled. I'm going to make a social media post to try to get another eval on my books later this week to make up for that. I'm going to work on this workshop I've been building over the past couple of weeks to give at this gym or to this running club to, again, try to get some more patients on my caseload. There's a give and take between the clinic and the contractor to keep the contractor's books full, but also with the understanding that you will not be paid to do nothing, right? We have all had those times in the clinic where maybe a big snowstorm came in, or certainly the days around holidays. I don't know why we try to schedule patients the day before Christmas or on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. We know all those people are going to cancel. People always are suddenly miraculously healed and have something better to do when town, when friends are in town, when they are off work, right? But traditionally, I have had times I can remember a distinct time, Christmas Eve at work, my tech and I, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift. 7 a.m. came in, everybody until 3 p.m. canceled, right? And we sat there and we were getting paid, right? We were W-2 hourly employees. So we got paid that whole day to see nobody. Waste of our time to be there doing nothing, very boring. Waste of the clinic's money to pay us to do nothing, see no patients, right? That would be a good example of when the 1099 contractor model would be a lot better. I could have just told that 3 p.m. that I wasn't going to be there and gone home when I came in and saw that the whole day had fallen apart, right? So again, pros and cons to this model, and it's just sitting down and figuring out what works best for you. If you believe one of the key principles to physical therapy practice is that everybody dresses and looks the same, 1099 practice is probably not for you, right? You're probably going to function best in a W-2 model. I would argue that in this modern era where we're transitioning more to hybrid practice and out of network practice, that more and more the 1099 model is the most lucrative, right? We are going to benefit best with folks who are independent, who are hungry to get patients and not only get patients on their schedule, but treat those patients really well so they come back. So they tell other friends and family member about the physical therapist they worked with and about the clinic in general to continue to generate business, right? That's probably going to work best as our practice continues to evolve. So it's a matter of sitting down and figuring out what's best for you from a management and ownership logistics perspective, but also from a financial perspective. Politics wise, we don't talk about politics much on here, but politics does play into part in this particular part of practice. And I believe it's really awkward to have to spend my time and my clinic's money to be the tax middleman in the W-2 model, right? I receive no benefit from the government to withhold taxes and pay them to the government. It's just a very interesting way to go about it in the W-2 model. And I don't really believe in it. I don't get any benefit for it. It costs me time. It costs my clinic money. And certainly, while I believe in the benefit of taxes, I don't believe that me as the small business owner should have to spend any amount of time or money withholding taxes from employees and then paying it to the government on their behalf every quarter. I think that's a really just weird, icky thing to be in the middle of. So here at Health HQ, we are 1099. We do not get to tell people when to see patients or how to see patients. We provide shared resources, right? We provide all the basic things you would need for physical therapy practice, tables, needling supplies, that sort of thing, gym space, gym equipment. And then we kind of just cut people loose to do their own thing. We don't dictate their schedule. We don't tell them how they practice. We care that they are helping people. They are helping people get better. They're demonstrating value to the people they're helping, and that those people come back for future appointments and tell other people about a great experience that they had so that they think about us the next time they think about needing physical therapy care. We've been doing this now for almost 5 years, and we're very happy with this model, and we have no intention of switching anytime soon. So that's an anecdote. I don't have a systematic review with meta-analysis to support that's the best way to conduct physical therapy practice, but it works for us in our leadership style and the way that we like to run business. So I hope this was helpful. We're going to continue this series. If you have questions about this, I'd love to answer them. You can throw them in the comments on the Instagram post here, and I'll get to them. If you're thinking, this is a lot, where do you learn all this stuff? Where do you learn about literally the nuts and bolts of creating a practice and all this legalese and financial stuff? Don't worry, we have a resource coming your way soon after the new year that we're excited to talk about. So just hang tight. If you're someone that's thinking about creating your own practice soon, or you're just on the fence about it, or you want to know what that looks like, then we have something coming your way soon. So I hope this was helpful. Have fun with Gut Check Thursday. I hope you'll have a fantastic weekend. It's our last weekend of live courses. So if you're going to be at a live course this weekend, I hope you have fun. Check out ptonice.com for all of our courses coming your way in the new year. Have a great Thursday. Bye, everybody.